So hi everyone, welcome to this mid-career mentoring program. Today's topic is work-life balance. My name is Rodrigo Perez Ortega, my pronouns are he and him, and I am a staff writer at Science Magazine. I'll be moderating today's Q&A, which is one of the most sought after ones from the survey we sent before starting the program. I would like to pass the mic to my awesome friend Bethany, who is also helping coordinate this mid-career mentoring program.
Hey everyone, I'm Bethany Brookshire. My pronouns are she, her. I am a freelance science journalist, and I am also deeply excited by this work-life balance topic because I don't have any. I don't know about the rest of y'all. But I also wanted to say happy Trans Day of Visibility, everyone who celebrates, and y'all should all celebrate. Back to you, Rodrigo.
Thank you, Bethany. I would like to introduce, pass on the mic to our speakers today, Laurel Hamers and Lila Guterman. Laurel, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Laurel Hamers. I'm a science writer at the University of Oregon at the moment. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm really happy to be here today. I'm excited to talk to you, but also I don't have it all figured out. So I'm excited to learn from other people in this session.
Thank you, Laurel.
Oh, and
go ahead, Lila. Sorry.
Laurel, did you want to say something?
Oh, our potential third panelist, AKA Ollie the cat, was about to make an appearance, but
yeah, one or the other of my children may end up walking by. It's oh, I see a kitty. I'm Lila Guterman. I am one of the editors at Science Magazine. My pronouns are also she, her. I have 2 kids, which is probably part of why I was asked to do this. I also don't have it figured out and look forward to learning from all of you. And I feel like, oh, I have worked at a lot of different places. So that's just, some background that on me.
That's great. Thank you, Laura and Lila. We are trying to make this particular session a little bit different. As questions come up, please go ahead and post them on the chat with a question next to them. We will be monitoring the chat and make sure that we would try to get to your question. If you have a question you want in the non-recorded portion, wait until the first 60 minutes are up, and then you can post it on the private question with private question before your actual question in the chat. Or you can also directly DM Bethany or me with questions that if you don't want your name attached to them. For this session, the different thing we want to do is we would actually want your input, because as we already established, we are not experts in everything, and we will really like to hear from you. So please, if you have good advice, perhaps not a question, but good advice on a topic we're discussing, please raise your hand virtually on Zoom, the little emoji, and we'll try to give you the mic. And if we do so, please try to be brief. All right, so Laurel, I'd like to kick things off just by asking very broadly about your own approach to work-life balance and how you try to achieve it.
Sure. I guess I will say to start off with that I think, like a lot of science writers, I grew up with the mentality of, you work really hard in school and you pour lots of time into energy and into building a successful career. And I really, based my sense of self-worth and my identity around, my achievements in school and at work. And that worked for a time, but a few years ago, I started getting really tired. And I realized that just squeezing friends and family and hobbies and nice things for myself around my job for the next 50 years until maybe I could someday retire was just not sustainable. Will the planet even be habitable then? Who even knows? So I started really thinking about work-life balance in terms of how to set myself up structurally for it. And that's meant really getting clear on what I need to be happy and thriving and successful beyond just work. yeah, that's meant putting a lot of effort into actively building a life where I have a job that I'm good at and enjoy, but where the other things that make me happy and make me feel fulfilled are just as prioritized. So it's not this like huge struggle to cram everything else around the edges. And, you know, on a big picture level for me, that's meant specifically pursuing job opportunities that aren't based on frequent tight deadlines and don't demand around the clock work. Because I know that for me, that kind of like hustle all the time job is not right for me, even though some people really thrive in that. And it's meant things like looking for a work situation where my commute is a 15-minute bike ride instead of an hour in the car, or like moving to a place where it's easy to pursue the kinds of hobbies that bring me joy. And not everyone has that kind of flexibility, but I think what it comes back to for me is really like making my plans and goals for the future based around more than just work, and giving those life and leisure goals equal weight to my career goals. And, you know, I still have to do all this day-to-day boundary work around like not letting work just take over my life, but setting myself up to make that easier has made a really big difference. That said, you know, I think it's really an ongoing process for me. I'm definitely a lot better at it than I used to be, but I am always learning more. So I'm really excited to be on this panel and to learn from other people in the group as well.
Great, thank you. What about you, Lila? I'm interested to know.
Yeah, so I was honestly kind of surprised when Rodrigo and Bethany asked me to help lead this session, because it's an area that I am so not an expert at, right? I mean, it's something I don't feel like I have sort of gotten it to an appropriate balance in any particular way. It's sort of things that I have learned as I've gone along and added or subtracted from my life. You know, when I told Bethany and Rodrigo, you know, why are you asking me? I'm no good at this. You know, they encouraged me to sort of share my own experiences, which I'm happy to do. And Bethany also pointed out that she knew about some of my hobbies. So I mention all of this for a few reasons here. One is to sort of set expectations that, like, I really feel like I can only talk about what has worked and not worked for me. Another is to mention imposter syndrome, which I think that, you know, a lot of us have, right? So that can get in the way of saying no, and it can make you feel guilty about turning things down. Because, you know, you think you have to do something constantly to prove that you're good enough, right? Or, you know, deserve to have the seat that you have. So, you know, that I think could be a topic for a whole nother session, but I did want to mention it. And then the third reason is just to make a point that I'm going to come back to about external appearances and comparing ourselves to other people. So just briefly about my career trajectory, I started at the UC Santa Cruz program, where one of my terrific teachers made the point of saying, your work is not you. And I was like, yeah, that's not true in my case, you know? And I think, like so many other people, like Laurel was just saying, you sort of buy into the, like, I must achieve in all areas of my life at all times. I, you know, wanted to do everything for every work task and be involved in every hobby that I could. And I was crazy with anxiety about keeping all the balls in the air. And then about a decade into my career, within a year of each other, I had a baby and got laid off. And you know, having a kid teaches you that you can't control anything, much less everything. You know, I was trying to control sort of everything about my life, and really, you know, those first few years are like about survival, yours and the kids, right? So, I mean, that was a big learning point. And then what I learned from getting laid off is that, like, you know, no matter how good you are at your job, which, you know, I think pretty good at it, you can love your job, but your job isn't going to love you, right? I mean, that's just, you know, you read that in these career advice things, but, you know, it really hits home when you're downsized. So before that happened, while I was, so the place where I got laid off from was the Chronicle of Higher Education. And while I was there, a friend, a colleague who became a friend, I watched her because she was, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years older than me, had 2 little kids and seemed to have it all. And I noticed her sort of, you know, she didn't come in early, she didn't stay late. And if that sort of, you know, fazed other people, she didn't let it get to her. And I was like, this is what I need to do, what I want to do. And so I've, you know, since for the past 15 years, I've sort of tried, not successfully, but tried to follow that lead. Along the way, one of the things that I've learned that is sort of something, you learn the things that you need to do and the things that are nice to do, right? So for me, I need to exercise. I need to work out pretty much every day, or else my anxiety goes through the roof and my depression goes through the floor, right? I mean, I just use that. On the topic of mental health, for me, that's one way to keep it. But, you know, the sort of realization that I can't be all things in every area or in any area has meant scaling back my ambitions in every area, right? I don't work out as much as I used to. I had to drop my beloved choral singing. It just, I couldn't do it and have 2 kids and an important job. I am never the mother who plans the school auction or takes, you know, or chaperones field trips or takes kids on elaborate vacations. And, you know, honestly, the ambitions that I had as a young science writer of sort of, you know, writing for the New York Times and changing the world, and, you know, it's not going to happen. You know, I love my work. I think I'm, you know, pretty good at it. I generally try not to let it take over my life. Sometimes it does. But, you know, it's just, my ambitions have become narrower. But I really do like my job, my work, and I like that I'm not always feeling like I'm about to drop the ball on something. There are some weeks that I do feel like that. And then to come back to my point about external appearances and comparing yourself, I mean, to Bethany, it may have looked like I do a lot of hobbies. To me, it feels like I don't, you know, I can knit during Zoom meetings. I don't do choral singing anymore, and the exercise I need, right, for my mental health. So, you know, those things may be visible, you know, cleaning the kitchen or staying up with a, you know, anxious teenager, or worrying about whether I'm even going to get meets expectations on my performance review. Those are the things that aren't visible, right? So I think that we, you know, we can learn from other people, as I did from my colleague at the Chronicle, and we can try to emulate them, but I don't think any of us is seeing what goes on in someone else's life, obviously. So I don't think any of us have really got it all figured out, but if you do, please tell me the answer.
Please do, we need it. You know, Lala, you mentioned, you know, like your work is not your identity, kind of. And I feel that sometimes, like, I look at other professions and it's easier to have that work-life balance. And I wonder, what is it about science writing or science communication, especially, that is sometimes hard to maintain that balance or achieve that balance? For me, I guess I feel passionate about it, but I would like to hear your thoughts.
I think it is a field that is full of people who are really sort of dedicated and achieving types. So we sort of feed off each other, wanting to all, do the most challenging, ambitious things that we can. I think that also it may just be that we're not seeing in other fields, the sort of the amount of time and effort that people are putting in. I think that, journalism in general, and maybe science writing in particular, but journalism in general has this sort of culture of overwork, right? And then we can feel really proud about like how many bylines we had, or how many weekends we had to work because of how important our work is, right? And I've tried to not let that be part of my life so much in recent years.
All right, Laurel, would you like to chime in about how what you think about this? Why is it so hard sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that makes it hard for me is that I know that other people are going to read the output of my work in a way that, and it's visible in a way that is not true in all fields. And I mean, I still struggle with that all the time. Like, I definitely have like a perfectionist drive to get every story to its pinnacle and just keep working on it and let it like take up as much time as I have to do it. But that is not always healthy, because I need time to do other things. I have other things to work on, other hobbies, etc. And I think one thing that has helped me get around that is like really nailing down for me what good enough work looks like. And for me personally, in my job, that's like, is the story accurate and does it communicate clearly? Like, not every piece I write is going to be something that rises to the level of, I want to include this in my portfolio, or share it with, share it as a clip. But as long as I feel like I am sort of being true to my values as a science writer of, accuracy, fairness, clarity, then I can feel, okay about what I'm putting out into the world, even though every piece isn't perfect.
Right. Yeah, for me, kind of like, because I mentioned, like, I'm passionate about science communication, I sometimes find myself reading a feature at 10 p.m. at night at bed, and then I wonder, is that work or is it personal time, or how am I reading this? Like, am I getting paid to read this? And for me, it's sometimes hard to set those boundaries that I think are important, but sometimes, I just do it and say, oh, wait, what am I, like, what is this, work or life? Can we talk a little bit about how you set those boundaries and what has helped you do that?
You want to take
Yeah.
this, Laurel?
Sorry, I was having some unmuting issues. I think, with the giant caveat that the exact boundaries that people set around their work are going to really vary person to person and job to job. I think for me, a lot of it has come down to realizing and accepting that I have a lot more control over my time than I thought I did. Like, a thing that I tell myself all the time lately is that time that is technically open on my calendar doesn't actually mean time that I am free to do this specific task. So like, I don't work on the weekends. I don't work in the evenings unless it's a very small and concrete and time sensitive task. I don't schedule tough interviews back to back during the workday if I can help it, because I know that really like drains my energy, and I'm not going to do as well on them if I'm like, and sometimes it's necessary, right? Sometimes you just have an out of control day, but like, to the extent that I can, I really try to like space that self out. I give myself breaks during the workday, to go for a walk, to actually eat lunch, so that when I get home at night, I'm not as like totally sapped from the workday. And I definitely, when I started doing that, I think I had a lot of guilt around doing it, because I felt like, oh, I wasn't making myself like wholly available to my employer at all times. But like the truth is that nobody is being productive writing for 8 straight hours a day, 5 days a week. And like just literally giving myself permission to stop pretending that that's true or that that's an achievable goal has been like extremely helpful for me in setting and maintaining those boundaries, especially because I feel like, you know, I don't know if you've ever had like a day where you're getting so much stuff done and it's amazing. You feel so productive, but the next day you have like a work hangover. Like your brain is just tired. You need rest in order to do well at your job. So that is a really big motivating factor for me. Bethany, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Hello, I am demonstrating the hand up feature. But no, I also had something I wanted to add, because it's something I've been thinking about with regard to balance. I feel like many of us think about work-life balance as something that we do a lot of research on and then we achieve and then we have it. And then it's done. Poof, we have work-life balance. But like I was a dancer in a former life. And as a dancer, I know that when I am balancing on the tip of a point shoe, every bit of my ankle is working constantly. Balancing is a process. It's a process that wobbles back and forth. And when you first, stand up on your point shoes, your ankles are strong, but they're not that strong. And the wobbling is extreme. And then as you gain kind of strength, the wobbling decreases until you look perfectly steady, but you're still working. And I feel like the boundaries that we have to set in work-life balance are like that. Our ankles and our boundaries will get stronger, but there's still wobbling that happens. And it's always still a process.
That's a really great metaphor. I love that, Bethany. I also wanted to add that, a piece of it for me is, and definitely like a challenge to maintaining those boundaries is like stuff has to get done. And sometimes our jobs ask a lot of us. And I know that that's like the most common reason why I end up working in the evenings or end up working on the weekends or whatever, is because I just feel like I have to get it all done. And I think, for one thing, if you're always hyperexerting yourself to get your job done, like working tons of extra hours, your employer doesn't really care as long as the work is getting done. And if you're doing the work of 3 people, like they're not incentivized to hire more people because you're managing it all, which is awful and terrible, and it should not be like that. So I think there's a lot of like structural work culture issues that definitely need to be fixed in our society, in journalism in particular. But I think that one thing that has worked really well for me is framing my workload to my supervisor in a way that is like makes it clear that like how much time all this stuff takes and what I can actually reasonably achieve in a day or in a week. If someone comes to me with a new project that they want done, I won't necessarily immediately tell them no. I'll say, great, I can do it, but like, here's what I already have on my plate. How should I reprioritize? I think that a lot of times people get more stuff piled on them because nobody except them has a really good sense of like everything they're actually juggling and how long that stuff takes, all that stuff takes them. So I think communication can help with that.
Yeah, thanks, Laurel. Lila, I wanted to go back a little bit when in your introduction about what your professor told you, and you were like, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me. I'm like a science writer, and then that changed. Can you tell us, like, I don't know if that hasn't happened to me yet, but was there a point in your life that you realized like that it was not your full identity being a science communicator, and there was more in life than that?
I feel like that has been sort of a gradual acceptance for me. I mean, I always, knew that my relationships with my family, my parents and sister, my husband, were really important, my friends. But I sort of felt like I could do everything, right? I could be really good and ambitious and work crazy long hours, and also, do all these other things and be the good family member and friend and singer and runner and all this. And maybe some people could do it. I couldn't. It sort of, I feel like for me, there have been sort of a number of things over the years that have happened that have sort of more and more dawned on me that, life, isn't fair, right? I mean, that sounds really immature thing to say for a 48-year-old, but that, it's, and now I'm sitting here thinking, am I 48 or am I 47? Anyway, I don't even know. That, you can work super hard on a feature story that then nobody reads. You can dash something off that wins an award. And, the sort of, I am not going to, earn more friends and happiness and love and trust and, satisfaction at the end of my life because I, worked 60-hour weeks instead of 50, or, it's just, that's, it feels to me at this point pointless. I mean, I will say I do work nights and weekends, not every night and not every weekend, but it's pretty regular. As an editor, I feel like my job is easier than a lot of people who are reporters, because I am not subject to the whim of the people I'm trying to reach. And I do have a team of other editors, and we can sort of trade off work, and so it's a little bit more predictable, but not always. And it does sometimes mean, if a story comes in at 5 and we needed to run that day, I will be working on it that evening. I will not be working on it during dinner time. I mean, that's one of the non-negotiables in my life. My kids and I am not good about following parenting advice. We're terrible at pretty much everything, but we always have dinner together. Okay, not always, but almost always. And,
it's the goal.
Sorry?
It's the goal.
Right, it's the goal. I would say it probably, 6 days out of 7 or even 13 out of 14. So, even if my kids spend 5 minutes sort of looking sullen and saying they wanted to get back to their homework and video games, it's still 5 minutes that we give them. So anyway, I sort of, I'm not sure I answered your question, but I answered around it.
Yeah, that's great. And I also saw a topic that came up on Slack and also is coming up in the chat I see is the thing about parenting. You have 2 beautiful kids. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have strategized or planned for your career while raising them? And also, if you took a lot of time off when they were little, how hard was it to get back in the game in case you did?
Yeah, I mean, so I have 2 kids, they're 14 and 11. At this point, I don't need to spend as much sort of face-to-face time as those of you who have toddlers, right? So my life has felt more sort of my own in a way in recent years. I will say that the sort of big kids, big problems adage is for sure true. It's much more, some of the issues that we deal with, both of them occupy my brain a lot. Even if I don't have to be playing on the floor with a 2-year-old or keeping them from falling down the stairs or whatever. When they were little, it was impossible. I mean, I meant what I said at the beginning. It was about surviving. For me, like my kids were both terrible sleepers. I felt like I didn't have, a functioning brain cell in my head. And it was all I could do to just sort of, get up, get them off to daycare, go to work, and, fall into bed, and so really everything else fell away. We weren't cooking. We hired people to clean the house. Work became really sort of like, I was doing, I would say, just enough to get by. I'd like to think that didn't play a huge role in my layoff, because presumably they knew that it wasn't going to last forever, but I was laid off when I had a 1-year-old. So, I think the second time around was a little easier for me, because there's sort of less of the, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm a complete failure at being a parent and being a worker and but it is really, really hard. I completely gave up, most of my sort of outside interests. And you just sort of figure out what you need to get through it. And I think you just have to, it's a really long time frame. But you have to realize that it's not always going to be as hard as it is when they're little. I think that's all you can do. I mean, I suspect it's probably quite different for the folks who are freelancing and have little ones, because I could sort of send them off to daycare and then concentrate on work to the extent that I could keep my eyes open and try to think, and sort of it sets up those boundaries, right? Like the end of your day, you may still get back on email and you may still have a story to work on, but you do have the sort of more real boundaries. And I sure would oh, Melissa, I see that you say your teen is much more work. Yeah, mine in many ways is too, but in terms of like the sort of every hour of every day you need to be sort of there for them, that's not true anymore. She would rather if I weren't there at all, I think sometimes. So anyway, so those early days, I didn't take a ton of time off. I took 4 months with my first and 3 months with my second. And then I went back 4 days a week just for a little bit in each of them. Jill, that's exactly how I experienced it too. Sorry, I shouldn't try to think and speak and read the chat at the same time. But so I didn't take a ton of time off. I do know that some people do and have some trouble getting back, and some people have less trouble. It's hard. I would love to hear from some freelancers who are parents and how you sort of set up the like when work starts, when we're actually freelancers who aren't parents too, because I feel like none of the, well, Bethany is full-time freelancing, but none of the rest of us. And I've done it twice in my career, and I was terrible at it both times because I couldn't set boundaries. So.
Yeah, thanks, Laila. I think we have Sarah who would like to speak. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just had a question for the group at large. I was a freelancer for about 5 years. And then last fall decided that I would probably benefit from some structure and some colleagues and that sort of thing. And so now I'm working for university, and I'm having a lot of trouble with my own sense of work-life balance now, which I'm surprised at, because I thought it would be the opposite. I thought that, with freelancing, everything would kind of creep together and not have nice boundaries. And now I just feel a sense of, feeling a little stifled, feeling a little a little bit like at the end of the day, I'm just exhausted and I don't really want to do anything else that's like stimulating and good for my soul because I'm so tired. And so I'm just kind of wondering how people who maybe have made that transition, how you find some balance again, or start to creep into, you know, figuring out like, okay, what do you want to do in the evenings now that you don't have any work to do? So thanks.
If someone from the audience wants to talk about that, please go ahead. Or, you know, work-life balance while being a freelancer as well. I think, like Lila said, we are the four of us, Bethany, Laura, and Lila, we are on staff right now. But I know freelancing is different, and boundaries might be also different. So I don't know if anyone from the audience wants to chime in and tell us about how that goes.
Sarah, I think,
Go ahead, Laurel.
oh, I was just gonna reiterate Sarah's point that I think being in an office is really draining. Like you're kind of expected to sit at a desk for 8 straight hours. And I don't feel like we were made to do that. I know that I wasn't. And I don't have a good answer for you because being exhausted at the end of the workday is absolutely like one of my biggest barriers to doing other fun things with my time.
So I was going to say about, you know, freelancing, what absolutely does not work. Since I have experience with that. Yeah, I started, you know, when I first started out in my career, I tried freelancing and I was not placing stories anywhere. And so I felt like I still needed to, you know, work constantly to try to find more stories, make more pitches, and it just wasn't working at all. And then after I got laid off, I freelanced for a while. And again, I had a 1-year-old. I had just been laid off and was pretty upset about that. But I felt like I was working all the time and I wasn't actually getting a lot done. You know, I think that I sort of let those boundaries that, you know, Rod was talking about a little bit, like, is this work? Is it not work? I really just let those completely dissolve. And I think that made things worse. So there's an example of what not to do if you're freelancing and trying to have work-life balance. I would love to hear people who have figured out what to do or what has worked for them.
I can say something if people want, or if sorry, I don't know how you raise your hand. I'm raising my hand. Yeah, so I'm currently sort of on staff at Nature. I have like a temporary full-time contract with them. So I'm like half on staff and half not, but I do have like a full-time gig. But I freelanced for 4 years. I mean, I freelanced for 6 years before this, and 4 of them were when our kid was ages 0 to 4. We have 1 kid, my husband and I. We're both freelancers actually, which is really crappy. But and yeah, like we let's see, I have like freelancing was really hard with a kid. It was hard without a kid, I thought, and it was hard with a kid. Things that I tried to do, I mean, I have a diagnosed anxiety condition. So like I already had a therapist and all that. And like that's vital for me in many ways. But like definitely having a therapist actually helps a lot, because a lot of the problem with freelancing as a parent of a little kid was like, I just felt like I just felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything. And like having a therapist was super helpful to get me to reframe stuff as like I was actually accomplishing quite a lot that I was just working at all, or, you know, that like talking about feeling like I was always behind or whatever. That was super helpful to have someone to talk to about that. I really just tried to set very low goals. Honestly, I tried to not expect very much of myself. Because for me, I feel much better when I set very low goals and then exceed them wildly than when I set goals and then don't meet them. That will like just send me into a shame spiral. because I'm a perfectionist. Setting like low goals, setting goals that I could control. So like pitching could be a goal, or like spending X time on X thing. Like there are a lot of things I can't control, like whether my pitches were accepted, but setting goals that I could control, at least some of my goals that I could control, were great. And like and trying to really like reinforce when I did things that I was proud of was super important. Like one of the things that I did, I mean, I felt like I was not making much money when I was freelancing with a little kid, and I felt like I was failing at that. But I did write for the New York Times for the first time when I had a little kid, for the New York Times parenting section when it launched. And like I had tried to really just like tell that to myself, like, you did this thing and you are awesome because you did this thing, which is not my normal way of speaking to myself inside my head. So I really had to work at it. But trying to really like keep track. I have even like a document, like in one of my self-employment like documents, I have like a list of like things that I am proud of that I did this year. And so they could be things like I wrote for the New York Times for the first time, or they could be things like I asked an editor for an extension without going into a shame spiral. But all of those things, like really just nobody else is going to celebrate you as a freelancer. I mean, if you do find other people to celebrate you as a freelancer, that is even better. I was unsuccessful at doing that, partly because pandemic and whatever, but like, I don't have like a tribe of like people who like are, you know, like who I like are my accountability buddies or whatever. But, and that also is great. Eventually I realized that I need like a lot more human interaction. And that's part of why I have this staff gig now. Well, also luck, but yeah, other people are super, super important for me. And so sometimes I also just need to like find an unrelated friend. Talking to people who aren't journalists is also something I super recommend, because they will be super impressed with everything you do, even if it feels very, very unimpressive to you. And they will also be like, of course, you know, in my industry, we treat each other with respect and like value each other's time or whatever. And you're like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's great advice. Thanks. Bethany, you wanted to say something as well.
I was muted. Hi. We were having a convo in the chat, Jill and I, and so this is my second stab at freelancing. I did a brief 6-month stab at freelancing before I went on staff at Science News, which I did with a huge sigh of relief. And this time I pursued freelancing by choice. And when I did it the first time around, I worked way too much. I had no balance. I couldn't escape the feeling that every hour I wasn't working was an hour I wasn't getting paid. And now, the second time around, I'm approaching it very differently. And there's 3 things that contribute to this. 1, having previously had a staff job, I actually was able to work out how much I was getting paid per hour. Then I could apply that to the freelance things that I do. And then I could give myself a raise. And I did. I do not stir for less than $100 an hour. I just don't. And that has helped a lot. It has helped me kind of balance, because if you can't afford me, well, then I'm not doing that for you now, am I? The second thing that helped me kind of pursue this is extreme amounts of privilege. In that I got a book advance good enough that I could actually afford to quit my job and live on it. And so I had the time to write the book and think about how I work successfully. What patterns of work for me, as opposed to plunging in and being like, oh God, I need to make rent this month. I had that time to say, okay, I know that, you know, for example, and this is the third thing, before I left my work at Science News, which by the way is a lovely place full of lovely people who do fantastic work. But before I left, I had a chance to actually look at my work patterns and look at my productivity there. And you know what? I never worked 8 hours a day. I mean, yes, I was at work. I was like on Slack 8 hours a day, or even more than 8 hours a day. But I was not working. I was gossiping with people. I was on Twitter. Like, I was not working. And when I really looked at it, I realized, and we discussed this in the Slack a little bit, I have about 6 hours of deep focus in me per day. And during those hours, oh my God, I get so much done. And when I say deep focus, I mean checking my email and actually giving long considered replies. I mean updating my expenses sheet. I mean updating my quarterly goals. I mean, if like everything, I have 6 hours of that in my soul per day. And so learning how to maximize that and then saying, okay, when I'm not doing that, I'm going to do everything else. And it's made a huge difference. So, and the other thing that I do is that has kind of helped me achieve some freelance balance is I am the queen of lists. As proof of this, here are my lists. So this is a weekly list. Here's daily lists. And I actually have an accountability buddy who I've been working with. She and we got together by chance in like 2018. And we send each other our daily to-do lists every single day, every day. And it includes not just like, I need to write this thing, I need to pitch this thing, I need to write this section of a piece, I need to prep this interview. It also includes, I need to adult, which means I need to eat breakfast. I need to make dinner, I need to do the dishes, the things that actually make your life run. And it's really helpful because you cross things off on your list and you feel really good about yourself. But it also means that, you know, my therapist can say, and I love my therapist, she can say, oh my God, you're working too hard, you're burned out, you really need to take some time. I don't believe that bitch. I don't believe her. Like, I love her, but I don't believe her. Like, she doesn't know my life. But when my accountability buddy says, hey, you've been working too hard, you need to take some time, I believe her because she sees my list. She sees it every day. She sees what I'm getting done. She sees what's on my plate. And I see the same for her. It's been such a huge thing for me, is like having that person who kind of knows your work as well as you do.
I love that idea of an accountability buddy. And maybe if you don't have one, you can find one on the Slack group in this mentoring program. Lila, I wanted to ask you, and this has also come up on Slack and in the questions, you know, as someone who manages other colleagues, basically you're a boss of other people. How can managers be supportive and help colleagues in their own work-life balance? And I guess that the follow-up question for you or anyone is, when you're going through a tough time, you know, such as a medical problem, potential burnout or a family emergency, what are some of the good strategies to talk about it or not talk about it or disclose it with your boss or clients?
So yeah, these are really good questions. So I have been a manager now for about 12 years. And yeah, I also have been a, you know, worker bee since like, you know, 98 or something. So, and in a slew of different jobs. So I have seen everything from really amazing bosses to really pretty terrible ones, and tried to sort of think about what I would want to do, what kind of boss I want to be, obviously, and also sort of the whole managing your manager thing. And a part of that, I think, is sort of establishing patterns when you you know, when you first start at a job. And you know, I think that a very upset seeming tween just walked into the house. Sorry. Uh-oh, he's not happy. A little distracted. So I really think that it's not fair of bosses to treat people like they do not exist as a human being. And I want to make sure that I always treat my sort of direct reports with the knowledge and awareness that they have lives and needs and interests outside of work. So it's, you know, I have one of my direct reports, she is on part-time, she works 60%, I think. And that's really, really tricky, right? I mean, there's in a place with deadlines and where pretty much everyone else is working full-time, her work can bleed into the rest of the time quite easily. And so, I mean, with her, we're often having conversations about, like, you know, you worked a ton last week. Do you want to take a comp day this week or next week? You know, I want her both to make sure she takes the time, you know, that we're not paying her for, but also to realize that I, as her supervisor, see the work she's doing and see the effort that she's putting in. So, you know, I do really think that it's important for bosses to recognize the sort of outside interests and outside needs of their staff. That's like when I am applying for a new job or something, you know, that's one of the questions I will always ask people on staff there, like, you know, how is it in terms of, you know, are people expected to work nights and weekends to, you know, to miss doctor's appointments or whatever, you know? And it's, you know, one of the things that I really like about science, and I think, you know, Rodrigo can test this, and Emily is here somewhere, Underwood, that, you know, sometimes the higher ups will be like, yeah, you know, I'm going to be out for 3 hours because I'm taking, you know, I'm going to my kids' track meet or whatever, you know. And it's like the acknowledgement that we all, you know, are human and not just our jobs is important. So hope that helps. There was another part of your question that I didn't.
Yeah, no, thanks, Laila. The other part was, and this is actually for anyone, if you want to like chime in, Laurel, or anyone in the audience as well, about if you're going through a tough time or just need time off for whatever reason, or cannot take, you know, if you're freelancing and an editor comes to you with an assignment and you just cannot take it, how do you go about, you know, dealing with that, or disclosing or not disclosing what's going on to a client or your boss in a way that, you know, is not hurting your career or the way they look at you?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot on the sort of culture of your office and your relationship with your boss. That you know, I think that it's, especially if you're new somewhere, you may not have that kind of relationship where you can talk to directly with your boss, and then I think you need to talk to coworkers who might be able to tell you, you know, a good strategy. I don't know, Laurel, but I'm sorry, you were going to say something. I think
Oh no, I mean, I think this is a tough question because it, as Laila said, I think it depends so much on your individual situation and your individual workplace. You know, I've definitely had bosses who were really supportive of mental health stuff. And I've also had bosses who gave me a hard time about physical health stuff, which told me that they probably weren't going to handle mental health stuff well. And I think I tend to employ the vague strategy of, like, I use a lot of my sick days as mental health days, but I don't necessarily tell my boss that. I just say, hey, I'm not feeling well today. I'm going to be offline. I'll see you tomorrow. And kind of deflect those questions by not going into too many specifics. But that doesn't kind of solve, I think, the bigger issue that you were talking about, Rod, of what if you need really substantial time off? And I don't think that I haven't done that personally, so I don't think I'm qualified to advise on that. But if anyone in the chat wants to chime in, I think this is a really important topic. So.
Yeah, the floor is open for anyone for the last couple of minutes before we end this first part session. Emily, go ahead, please.
Thanks. This is a little half-baked, but I'm thinking a bit about aging and life experience. And, you know, I think having started in a newsroom, like I had a staff job right off the bat, went from an internship to a staff job. And I'm curious, I don't know if this is universal, but I do get the sense that there's an expectation of young writers, the fresh off the press writers, that it's fine if they're pulling all-nighters. It's fine if, they're sort of, it's like a hazing / paying your dues period that I think in some ways is about learning how to manage your own stress, learning how to be a more efficient writer. There's a lot of important learning that happens, but it's also a time when you can set up really bad habits and break your body and maybe, destroy your longevity in the career. And I think it's telling that sort of like only maybe in your late 30s or your mid 30s or later do you sort of have to go, wow, I can't do this anymore. I have to reassess. And I'm wondering, the question that I have, or sort of just the topic I want to raise, is like, how do we support younger writers in that pipeline and not like think both about supporting ourselves, but not then reinforcing that culture that it like, well, I had to spend, night after night eating McDonald's alone, like, so, but that's how you kind of earn it. And I think it's easy to like perpetuate that. And it's something that I certainly wouldn't want to be perpetuating. Just an issue I wanted to raise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. It sort of goes into this culture of overwork that we've got. And I feel like it is important to, if you see, a younger writer who seems to be on, sort of maybe overwork, engaging in overwork, to try to maybe take them aside and say, hey, you don't need to do this. You may want to, but just so we don't actually need you to be writing 6 stories every day, or I mean, whatever it is. But I think, like, I have never been I've never bought into the whole pay your dues, and if you're not pulling all-nighters, you're not working hard enough. And hopefully, like leading by example can help, but also actually, trying to sort of actively mentor younger writers.
Yeah, I think that same thing happened to me when I was starting out, and then I was lucky to have editors who actively told me, hey, you can say no, it's okay, if you're overworked or you're overwhelmed. And also, if I ended up working on a weekend, they would tell me, oh, you're taking Friday off, like, no question. And for me, it was like, oh, but I don't need to. And I was like, I don't care, you do it. So I think I was lucky in that regard. And that kind of like made me appreciate my time more and realize that I don't need to be 24/7 available, even if I'm starting out and you're trying to make a name of yourself. So that really helped me. We are out of time for the recorded part, but we will stop the recording and move on to the unrecorded part, so you can continue asking questions. I just want to put it on the record and thank Lila and Laurel for this amazing session. I think we've learned a lot. Yeah, thank you. It's been great, and we'll move on to the unrecorded session.